101.1, The Answer, Doc Washburn Show, continues where you can sound off and talk back at 501-401-1011. My first public appearance since returning to Little Rock Radio will be Saturday, November 8th at 2 p.m. That is a week from tomorrow at 2 p.m., and that will be at the Salem Media's annual Faith and Liberty Summit at the Four Point Sheraton in Little Rock. Now, my friends Dave Ellswick, Steve Marston, and our national guy, Hugh Hewitt, will all be there. But I'll be speaking at 2 a week from tomorrow, 4 Point Sheraton in Little Rock. Don't miss it. All right, now, I had an interview the other day with the great Robert Spencer, best-selling author who has been trying to warn us about jihad since before September 11th, 2001. We talked about the concern that not only is Zohran Mamdani a socialist, he's also very much a pro-jihad Muslim. And what's going to happen when there are jihad attacks in New York City and he tells the NYPD to look the other way. Now, why do I bring this up a couple of days later? Well, we got breaking news. Fox News learns that thwarted Michigan Halloween terror plot had connection to ISIS. Have you heard about this anywhere? I didn't think so, but that's why I'm here. No, we'll get to the local stuff. We'll get to Sarah Huckabee Sanders. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. There's a lot of stuff to talk about today, but I got to talk about this first. Fox News has learned a potential terror attack. The FBI said it thwarted in Michigan ahead of Halloween weekend had a connection to ISIS. Now, let me explain to you why Fox News, along with any and all mainstream media, will write the story this way. They will never tell you that the thwarted terrorist attack actually has just a connection to Islam itself. No, they're always looking for some connection to some terrorist group. And that's fine. If you can prove a connection to ISIS and you can take these people out, that's fine. But they never, ever are going to tell you where the incentive, where the impetus comes from. And that is straight out of the pages of the Quran and the other Islamic holy books, which are replete with exhortations for Muslims to kill non-Muslims. Now, fortunately, most Muslims don't do that. But these guys in Dearborn, Michigan, hey, remember last we heard about Dearborn, Michigan, was a Christian pastor complained to the city council in Dearborn, Michigan, that they were renaming a street after some jihad terrorist over in the Middle East. And you remember what the mayor of Dearborn, Michigan told the Christian pastor? He said, "You're not welcome in this city any longer. You need to leave. And when you do, when you move away from Dearborn, Michigan, we'll have a parade to celebrate you leaving." So, this is a serious concern. But let's give you the rest of this article here from Fox News. A top federal law enforcement source told Fox News earlier today that the attack plot was tied to international terrorism, but more information was not immediately available. The FBI said today that it prevented a potential terrorist attack in Michigan, arresting multiple suspects accused of plotting violence over the Halloween weekend. FBI Director Kash Patel posted on Twitter, and I quote, "This morning, the FBI thwarted a potential terrorist attack and arrested multiple subjects in Michigan who were allegedly plotting a violent attack over Halloween weekend. More details to come. Thanks to the men and women of FBI and law enforcement everywhere, standing guard 24/7 and crushing our mission to defend the homeland. Okay. In a statement to Fox News, FBI Director Kash Patel said the FBI's quick response prevented a potentially tragic situation from unfolding. Again, quoting, "Through swift action and close coordination with our local partners, a potential act of terror was stopped before it could unfold. The vigilance of this FBI prevented what could have been a tragic attack, and thanks to their dedication, Michigan will have a safe and happy Halloween." FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino, my buddy, also praised the reported operation, calling it an example of proactive law enforcement that saves lives. In a statement to Fox News, Dan Bongino said, and I quote, "This is what real law enforcement looks like. Proactive, relentless, and focused on saving lives. Our agents and partners in Michigan acted fast, followed the evidence, and stopped a threat before anyone got hurt. Under the leadership of Director Patel and the watch of this FBI, America is a safer place." Bongino also posted on Twitter, writing, "Protecting the homeland is our top priority. We will not rest." Jason Pack, retired FBI supervisory special agent, told Fox News Digital, quote, "As a retired FBI agent, I can tell you that cases like the one in Michigan highlight how these investigations are carefully built over time and why they are so important to public safety. The FBI often becomes aware of potential threats through a tip from the public, a local police partner, or activity observed on online platforms where individuals share violent or extremist ideas. When someone independently expresses a desire or plan to harm others, the Bureau may use undercover agents or trusted sources to engage that person in a controlled setting. Agents are trained to avoid any actions that could be considered entrapment, and all undercover operations follow strict oversight and legal guidelines," unquote. Retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent Jason Pack said that following this morning's arrests, agents are likely executing search warrants to collect more evidence. The Detroit Public Affairs Office confirmed to Fox News that members of the FBI field office in Michigan were in Dearborn and Inkster, which apparently is a little town close to Dearborn, this morning, but there's no clear indication if this was connected to the thwarted attack. Well, I think it's reasonable to assume that it was. Okay, now, again, a little bit of context here at the end of the Fox News article. News of the thwarted plot comes 10 months after a guy named Shamsud Din Jabbar plowed a pickup truck into New Year's revelers on New Orleans Bourbon Street. 15 people were killed, dozens were injured, making one of the deadliest acts of terrorism in the U.S. since 9/11. Shamsuddin Jabbar's truck carried an ISIS flag, and the FBI said he was inspired by the terror group. Well, again, okay, fine. You want to say he was inspired by ISIS? Well, who was ISIS inspired by? They don't want to talk about that, do they? So, until and unless our leaders are willing to discuss the hard truth of where the incentive, where the impetus for jihad violence comes from, we're just going to be going in circles, aren't we? because you can't. How can you defeat your enemy if you don't know your enemy? Let me just tell you something. If you heard this before, please forgive me because plenty of people haven't heard it before. When I was a little boy, my daddy told me about World War II. And he said the reason those Japanese kamikaze pilots were willing to do suicide missions, were willing to fly planes down the smokestacks of American ships at sea, instantly committing suicide, was because they believed that Japanese Emperor Hirohito was God. And God was going to take care of him. God was going to look out for him. All right. Now, at the conclusion of the war, and I don't know if it's before or after the Japanese officials signed the official surrender papers on the deck of the battleship, I think it was USS Missouri in Tokyo Harbor. I don't know if it was before or after that, but at some point right around that time, General MacArthur had a conversation. General Douglas MacArthur, war hero, had a conversation with Emperor Hirohito. And he said, here's the deal. You got one of two choices. On the one hand, we can have some Nuremberg trials right here in Tokyo, and you can look forward to being executed for your war crimes, for starting this whole thing and killing who knows how many Americans. On the other hand, if you want to live a long life and die peacefully in your bed at an advanced age many years from now, here's what you have to do. You, Emperor Hirohito, have to get on nationwide Japanese radio and tell your people you're not God and they need to stop fighting as if you are. That Japan is going to be part of the international community and lay down your arms and stop trying to kill everybody who's not Japanese. And the emperor said, okay, so all I have to do is go on national radio here in Japan and say that, and then I don't have to go to prison, be executed. And MacArthur's like, yeah, that's the deal. Emperor Hirohito's like, well, that sounds like a pretty good deal, man. I like that. So that's what he did. Now, why am I saying that in relation to what we are up against now? I'll tell you coming up. I'll tell you what we need to do, which heretofore none of our leaders have been willing to do. Well, there's one. There's one who's gotten pretty close. And he is a Republican United States Senator. We'll talk about him too. So that's coming up as the Doc Washburn Show continues on 101.1 The Answer. 101.1, The Answer. Doc Washburn Show continues. Sound off and talk back at 501-401-1011. So there was a big jihad terror attack scheduled for Halloween weekend. And the FBI apparently arrested a whole bunch of people in Dearbornistan. That's what we call Dearborn, Michigan, because it's the first majority Muslim city of any kind of size in the U.S., but it certainly won't be the last. And so before the break, I was talking about General MacArthur telling the Emperor of Japan at the end of World War II that unless you want to be executed after a Nuremberg trial, you got to tell the whole country on nationwide Japanese radio, you're not God. You want to live a long, healthy life, die in your sleep when you're in your 90s, whatever, that's what you got to do. And the Emperor's like, I'll do it. I'm down. Sure. Now, the question is, why did I bring that up? I want you to listen. I want you to listen closely. There have been over 48,000 violent jihad attacks around the world since September 11th, 2001. If you don't believe me, go to the website, thereligionofpeace.com, because they've been keeping track since September 11, 2001. A lot of those jihad attacks were done in countries that do not have military bases in the Middle East. See, a lot of people believe, oh, we brought it on ourselves. Oh, it's all our fault. Ron Paul. Well, no wonder. We got military over there. Oh, what about the jihad attacks in countries that don't have military over there, that haven't done anything to Muslims at all? So where does this maniacal hatred, not just of Jews, but of anybody not Muslim, come from? It comes from the Quran, and it comes from the other Islamic holy books, the Sunnah, or the Hadith, if you will. And until and unless our leaders are willing to accept that the problem is not radical Islam, the problem is not Islamism, the problem is not radicalized lone wolf terrorists who may or may not be associated with a group. The problem is Islam. All four major schools of Islamic jurisprudence, the Al-Azhar University itself in Cairo, which is the closest thing to the Vatican that Islam has, they all endorse violent, proactive jihad, all of them. So you can wipe out all of Hamas and everybody else who agrees with Hamas in Gaza, and as long as there's still Muslims who believe that the Quran wants them to kill the rest of us, it'll just be a speed bump for these people. There will still be violent jihad attacks. That's why you're seeing what you're seeing in the U.S. There have been a number of jihad attacks in the U.S. since September 11, 2001. We have to deal with the root of the problem, and this is something that our leaders don't want to hear about, Republican or Democrat. They don't want to hear about it. Now, there's one guy, a guy from Arkansas, who was a football coach all over the place. Most famously, Auburn University, Tommy Tuberville. He's out there saying, we got to pass a law against Sharia law in the USA. And here is his pinned tweet. Islamists chant death to America, abuse and rape women, many 6-year-olds, and would love to see every Christian and Jew murdered. Calling radical Islam out for what it is doesn't make you an Islamophobe. It makes you a truth teller. Radical Islam is a violent cult, and it has no place in this country. We must shut down Sharia law. Okay, well, see, the only problem with that, of course, is, as the president of Turkey once said so eloquently, there's no such thing as radical Islam or moderate Islam. There's just Islam. Now, there can be moderate Muslims who don't take seriously what the Quran says about killing the rest of us, and that's great. I get along with those folks fine. But the point here is that you have plenty of so-called moderate Muslims pushing back at Coach Tuberville. I say pushing back at Senator Tuberville, saying, oh, come on, man. You're getting crazy now, man. You're imagining things. You are an Islamophobe. You know, what's the big deal? There's no such thing as Sharia law. We're not doing that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the closest we've got to anybody calling a spade about what the problem is here is Senator Tommy Tuberville. And I'm wondering if either of our senators, John Boesen or Tom Cotton, have signed on as a co-sponsor. I mean, I hope they have. I'll try to find out during the break. I wouldn't be surprised if they did. That'd be wonderful. But, you know, I don't know yet. I don't know. Sometimes these bills don't go anywhere because nobody co-sponsors and they can't get them out of committee, much less onto the floor for a vote. I don't know, but we'll find out. All right, news about Sarah Huckabee Sanders, governor of the state of Arkansas, coming up as the Doc Washburn Show continues right here. 101.1 The Answer. Doc Washburn Show continues. You can sound off and talk back. 501-401-1011. My first public appearance since returning to Little Rock Radio. Scheduled for a week from tomorrow, 2 p.m., Salem Media's annual Faith and Liberty Summit at the Four Points Sheridan in Little Rock. So, looking up Senator Tommy Tuberville's Preserving a Sharia-Free America Act, which is Senate Bill 3009, and he introduced it on October 15th this year, and it has no co-sponsors. So if it has no co-sponsors, that means Tom Cotton and John Bozeman have not signed on because nobody signed on. I guess that's an unpopular bill. I don't know, man. Okay, news about Sarah Huckabee Sanders is coming up. News about the governor coming up, but every once in a blue moon, we actually get a call from a listener, and so that's always fun. So let's go to Marlo in Little Rock. Marlo, you're on the Doc Washburn Show. What's up?
Hey, what do you say, Doc? Thank you for what you do, man, and I'm so glad you're back on. I hope you get some more hours and more time on the radio.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Wake us dumb Americans up. I can't believe how dumb we are. Yeah, you was talking about Islam, man. They back at the Barbary Coast Pirates, they were attacking. We weren't nowhere near them on their land or nothing. We was just floating by to do business.
Yep.
And they would capture our boats and take our people prisoner, slaves, and so that's a lot of crap. And we had two presidents, a Democrat and a Republican, or that's what they say. They are a communist and a Democrat. But they stood up there and lied to all America, man, saying Islam was a religion of peace. It's never been a religion of peace. The diplomat there in Tripoli. Was it Tripoli? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because they didn't really have countries per se like Libya or whatever. So the diplomat from Tripoli to England. I think that's who Benjamin Franklin was trying to figure out, hey, how come you're doing this?
Yeah, and he wrote, I got one of David Barton's Bibles.
Oh, yeah.
Founder's Bible.
Yeah.
And it's got exactly what the diplomat wrote. And they asked him, they couldn't figure out, what kind of religion would do what they were doing. And he wrote it out in plain fact, that they were better than everybody else, and they were whole world was going to submit to them.
Yeah, where did you get the justification for doing this? He's like, what's right in the Quran? Yeah. You guys never read the Quran? Yeah.
Right, man. And and the thing about the Quran, I've heard one expert on Islam. He said that the latter verses and chapters, they abrogate the earlier chapters and verses because he started out as a peaceful, he wanted to be a peaceful Muslim, but he couldn't get no followers. So that's when he changed to, his jihad, and he killed Muslims and took their stuff. I mean, if anybody would just read the information, it don't take long to figure out what they're doing. And the Bible talks about it, in the end days, the sons of Ishmael. It's right there. It's right in front of our faces, but we don't want to face the truth.
Well, let me explain to some of the listeners what you're talking about here. So a lot of times when people will say, hey, why all this violence from Muslims, and a Muslim will quote a verse out of the Quran saying, well, no, actually Islam's supposed to be peaceful. So these are some fringe lunatics who are twisting things around, and they are trusting that in most cases, the people, the non-Muslims they're talking to will just take their word for it. Oh, well, there's a peaceful verse right there. So the Islamic concept of naskh, N-A-S-K-H, which means abrogation, means that if there is a verse or verses in the Quran that contradict other verses, whatever was put in there later, chronologically speaking, abrogates the earlier stuff. So as you had said, the peaceful verses are from earlier on when he didn't have enough of an army to go to war with people, and the violent verses are from later, and so the violent verses completely abrogate the earlier verses. But there's something that's even more insidious than that. there is a verse that they often quote that says, and they'll say it with great fervor. The Holy Quran says that to kill an innocent man is like killing all of humanity, but to save the life of an innocent man is like saving the life of all humanity. Well, yeah, but see, that's taken out of context. When you look at the two verses together, first of all, it says, we told the people of the book, this is what they should believe. People of the book, meaning Jews who have the Old Testament and Christians who have the Old and New Testament. It doesn't apply to them, but it also says that this is unless the person you're killing is spreading mischief in the land, and they don't define what that means. So any of us who are saying, hey, I'm not Muslim, I'm never going to be a Muslim, I'm not going to submit to Islam, I'm never going to submit to Islam, how hard would it be for them to say, well, you're spreading mischief in the land then? We have every right to smite you on the neck.
Yeah.
So anyway.
You brought up Erdogan. You said it is a small, the jihadists is probably a small, considering how many over a billion, it's a rather small group. But they don't tell you that over 80% of Muslims want Sharia law. And
sure,
Erdogan, he's wanting that the caliph. He wants to be the caliph, head of the caliphate.
Yeah,
and that's the only thing they're missing. See, if they've got the caliph and they got the caliphate, they can write out their fatwas to destroy, to attack whoever and do whatever they want to do.
Right. And Erdogan, Marlo's talking about there, or as I say over in Turkey, Erdogan. He is the president of Turkey. He's the dictator of Turkey.
Yeah,
so that's a guy who said, look, there's really no moderate Islam or radical Islam. There's just Islam. People don't, he's not doing any favors to Muslims in a primarily non-Muslim country like the U.S. They're like, hey, Erdogan, would you mind shutting up? We're trying to do a thing over here. He's not really helping them out. But fortunately, most people aren't paying attention anyway. So, they don't hear about it.
You got that right, Doc. Well, hey, man, I appreciate you giving me the time to talk, and keep up what you're doing, bro.
All right. God bless you, Marlo. We appreciate you. Have a great day. Thank you very much. And wasn't that neat on a Friday? We get a caller who is willing, whether he realizes it or not, to quote the late, great Ronnie Van Zant, Leonard Skinner. You got that right. You sure got that right. All right. Now, let's get to what's going on, the breaking news right here in Arkansas. First of all, and a big thank you to the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette for some breaking news here. And I know I'm going to mispronounce the reporter's last name, but I want to give credit where it's due. So let me give it a stab. Brett Barroquer. Brett, I'm sorry, buddy. I probably got your last name wrong, but I'm giving it my best shot. They taught me phonics. I'm that old. Article entitled Arkansas Supreme Court Strikes Down Effort to Put Paper Ballot Initiative Before Voters. That's really not a good thing. You know what I'm saying? That's unfortunate. And yet, that's what we have to deal with, this being Arkansas. So let's take a look at what they said here. A ballot initiative pushing for the hand counting of paper ballots across a stretch of the state won't appear before voters in 2026. This is what the Arkansas Supreme Court ruled today, saying it was filed too early. Young Steve, filling in for producer CJ today. Have you ever heard of a court saying we're going to turn something down because it was filed too early? I mean, I've certainly heard of people getting stuff turned down because, oh, sorry, you didn't meet the deadline. Nope, you're too late. See ya. Wouldn't want to buy you, but never filed too early. A judge can't force the clerk to certify it if the measure hasn't been filed in a timely manner. Well, timely manner usually means that you got it in before the deadline, not as filed too early. Justice Sean Womack, writing for a majority of the Arkansas Supreme Court, turned away an effort to have the hand-marked, hand-counted paper ballot ordinance of 2024 be certified for the 2026 election. The decision also struck down a section of Arkansas's election law as unconstitutional because it allows a local initiative petition to be certified for an election more than 3 months away. Wait, what? Let me make sure I understand what's going on here. The Supreme Court strikes down part of Arkansas's election law because it allows a local initiative petition to be certified for election more than 90 days before the election. What could be the problem with that? This is nuts. The ruling reverses a decision by 16th Circuit Judge Holly Meyer ordering Cleburne County Clerk Rachel Evans to recount signatures and certify the measure before placing it before the voters. Sean Womack wrote, and I quote, "Put simply, when a proponent of a local ballot initiative fails to timely file his petition, a circuit court cannot require a county clerk to certify that initiative for that election." Like I say, I've heard of stuff getting thrown out because you didn't file it in time. But to throw something out because maybe you filed it 91 days before the election instead of 90 days? Really, Sean? Now, there was a dissent. It's my duty to report to you there was a dissent. Justice Rhonda Wood dissented, saying the courts mishandled the case. Here's a quote from her. The majority raises legal issues on its own, finds facts that are absent from the record, and leaps over settled law to reach its decision. Unquote. Now, whose opinion do you think I'm going to think is correct here? The majority or Rhonda Wood, who says, and again, this is so good that it bears repeating. The majority raises legal issues on its own, finds facts absent from the record, and leaps over settled law to reach its decision. Come on, man. Sean, buddy, for real? Seriously? So not only should we applaud Justice Rhonda Wood for her dissent, but I think we should also applaud Arkansas Democrat Gazette staff writer Brett Barraquer, or however you say his last name, because he didn't have to put that in his article. Nobody would have been any the wiser because nobody's going to actually look up the decision. He didn't have to put that in there, but God bless him, he did. And we're so much the wiser for it. Know what I'm saying, Holmes? Now, I've got plenty more. There was a big front page story in Wednesday's Arkansas Democrat Gazette about people who were complaining about Sarah's electioneering, filing criminal complaints with Little Rock Police Department, Pulaski County Sheriff's Office. I filed a complaint today, but I filed it with somebody different. I don't think any of it's going to go anywhere, but that's not the point. That's not the point. As Americans, we are trained. We are programmed. When we're trying to decide whether to do something or not, to say, well, it's not going to do any good. Why should I even bother? Why should I even waste my time? It's not going to do any good. Why should I even, talk to so-and-so about whatever? Not going to do any good. But what we often don't think of is, but is it the right thing to do? Because you never know what God's plan is. I want to make it more specific. Those of us who are believers in the Lord Jesus Christ, those of us who are Christians, how many times in our lives have we decided, well, there's no point in trying to share the gospel with so-and-so. It's not going to do any good. He's not going to go for it. But we're commanded to share the gospel. How do you know? You don't know how God's working on somebody else's heart. But we've all done that, haven't we? Because we look at things according to the flesh instead of according to the Spirit. What's the right thing to do? Well, the right thing would be to share the gospel with that person. That would be the right thing to do. But it is definitely an American mindset to go, well, what's the point? It's not going to do any good. You don't know that. As opposed, instead of, well, it's not gonna be worth it. How about we look at, well, yeah, but what's the right thing to do? What's the right thing to do? So in just a couple of seconds, I'm going to try to do the right thing by sharing with you the best kept secret in American healthcare. That's coming up as the Doc Washburn Show continues. 101.1 The Answer. Charlie Kirk found out about the best kept secret in American healthcare back in 2019. He was told he's going to be bedridden for weeks, but his doctor adjusted his atlas, and he was elated, flabbergasted. He pulled out his phone, said, "Hey, doctor, so-and-so," I can't remember the guy's name. "We're going to do a testimonial video right now." And after Charlie was taken from us, the doctor posted the testimonial video on his Facebook again. That's way up in Chicago. My Dr. J.R. Crabtree does the same thing here in Central Arkansas. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. Do you struggle with sinuses, allergies, dizziness, vertigo, blood sugar issues, fibromyalgia, eczema, psoriasis, or migraines? Well, the Arkansas Upper Cervical Center might be able to help you, and here's how. Your skull weighs anywhere from 8 to 15 pounds. It rests on the C1 or Atlas top bone of your spinal column, which only weighs 2 ounces. So it's really easy for your Atlas to get out of alignment. Now, if it does, because that's right where your brainstem is, that imbalance can cause your entire spinal column to get kinked up like a chain. When that happens, central nervous system isn't able to communicate with the rest of your body the way God designed it to do. Now, I suffered for years from severe hay fever, 5 or 6 weeks every spring, all my life, had migraines all my life. After I got my Atlas adjusted, the hay fever and the migraines disappeared for good. Whatever you are suffering from, do yourself a favor. Call my friends at the Arkansas Upper Cervical Center for a free consultation. Visit their website, turnmypoweron.com. They have helped so many people that I know. Once again, the website is turnmypoweron.com. 101.1 The Answer. Doc Washburn Show continues. You can sound off and talk back. 501-401-1011. So, Sarah lost in court again. Thank you. Big thank you to Michael White, one of the Pulaski County election commissioners. Hot off the presses. This is from a little bit earlier this afternoon. House District 70 will be having an election prior to the fiscal legislative session beginning in April. So she already lost in court recently. Gary Stubblefield, just a wonderful guy, state senator, passed away in early September. And the Arkansas Constitution says that when a seat in the legislature is vacated for whatever reason, the person dies, is arrested and hauled off in handcuffs, whatever reason, the governor has to schedule a special election within 150 days. She's like, no, I want to wait 274 days because I don't want the people in that district to have any representation in the legislative session next spring. Oh, okay. She didn't give that as the reason, but that's obviously it. So there was another vacancy. Carlton Wing, state representative, Arkansas State House, District 70, North Little Rock. Well, he's been appointed to be in charge of the AETN, the Arkansas Educational Television Network, the people who bring you the fine, sparkling programming from PBS. So, he had to quit his House seat for that. And she wanted to wait until after the legislative session. Well, Circuit Judge, I know. Attorney General Tim Griffin will appeal this one too, I'm sure. Circuit Judge Sean Johnson. That's just not just any Sean Johnson. That's Sean J. Johnson. Says, in compliance with the statutes governing special elections, the court finds that the writ should be issued and the relief sought within the petition granted. The dates contained in the proclamation must be revised to reflect the special election for House District 70 shall be held March 3rd, 2026, as it is the soonest practicable date on which the special election might be held. So before legislative session. Now, why would your governor not want you to have representation in the during a legislative session if you lost your state senator or state representative? She's not saying. All right, I filed a complaint about her electioneering. We'll talk about it right at the top of the hour news. The Doc Washburn Show continues. 101.1 The Answer. 101.1 The Answer. Doc Washburn Show continues, where you can sound off and talk back at 501-401-1011. So, Wednesday, front page news, Arkansas Democrat Gazette. A couple of young men from Franklin County put in criminal complaints with the Little Rock Police Department and the Pulaski County Sheriff's Office, claiming that Sarah Huckabee Sanders, our governor, broke the law on electioneering because she was talking about a candidate she had voted for and encouraging other people to vote for this candidate, et cetera, within 50 feet. Actually, within 40 feet of the polling place where she had just voted. And people were walking past her to go in to vote. So, and there's video, KRK4, KTV, THV11, Associated Press, and the Arkansas Democratic Gazette. And it's no excuse that she asked her staff, am I far enough away from the polling place? They told her she was, but she wasn't. So anyway, a couple of gentlemen from Franklin County filed official criminal complaints at Little Rock Police Department, Pulaski County Sheriff's Office, and also our friend Marvin did the same thing, and he made the end of the article. And now today, the hapless Marvin Fisher, the hapless, sorry, I didn't get his last name in there. The hapless prosecuting attorney for Pulaski County, 6th District, Will Jones, said, "Nah, I'm not gonna indict her." Well, Will, I thought you're a Democrat. You may as well be a rhino, man. Come on, buddy. So I had the idea of a lawyer friend gave me the idea of filing a little bit different kind of complaint. You know, because people file complaints with the Little Rock Police Department, Pulaski County Sheriff's Office. She clearly broke the law. She's on video breaking the law, 5 different entities, all 3 Little Rock TV news operations, plus the Democratic Gazette. If that wasn't enough, plus the AP. So I had a little bit different idea. And at first, the Attorney General, Tim Mango Griffin's office, didn't want to accept any complaints. And then finally, they were like, okay, we'll accept it, and we'll just forward it on to the Arkansas Election Commission, which is going to do nothing because they got their own house rule that if you don't get a complaint in within 49 days after an election, then I can do anything. And Tim knows that. But anyway, that's a way for him to get people out of his hair. I filed a complaint with the State Ethics Commission with the Sloan fellow who's the director over there. Now, what they want you to do when you go to their website, they want you to fill out a form. But they made a big mistake because they gave you an email address for State Ethics Commission Director Sloan, so you can email and attach your form. So I had a little bit different idea. I emailed a letter without the form because, I don't want to mess with the form, and I don't know if the form was even going to allow me to say what I need to say. And I just wanted to email Graham F. Sloan, director of the Arkansas Ethics Commission. So in the interest of full disclosure, I will share with you, gentle listener, what I said. Dear Director Sloan, the purpose of this letter is to register a formal ethics complaint against Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders for the following prohibited activity. Arkansas law, ACA 7-1-103A9A, prohibits anyone from remaining within 100 feet of a polling place entrance or engaging in electioneering while voting is taking place, except voters actively entering or leaving an authorized election officials. Once a person has voted, that exemption ends. A conviction under this Class A misdemeanor would permanently disqualify a person from holding public office in Arkansas. Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders has twice remained inside the restricted 100-foot boundary after voting in March 2024 and in November 2024 during early voting in Pulaski County. There are numerous videos from all three Little Rock TV news operations, the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, and the Associated Press confirming that she engaged in this prohibited activity. In each instance, she voted and then lingered within the zone, and in one instance inside the polling location, to give media interviews in which she expressed opinions about candidates and a ballot proposition while voters were still entering and exiting. Her position as governor of the state of Arkansas is more likely to influence voters entering the voting precinct much more than an ordinary citizen engaging in the same prohibited activity. Thank you in advance for your careful consideration of this complaint. And I signed it. My name, talk show host, 101.1 The Answer, Salem Media, and our address. So we'll see, we'll see if I get any kind of response to that. But again, Attorney General Tim Griffin, when he announced his persecution of our friend, Colonel Conrad Reynolds, said, look, this has nothing to do with who Conrad Reynolds is, what his political stance is on anything. This is just about the law. It doesn't matter if it was Susie Smith or John Jones or whoever. You just got to have to uphold the law. So he's not going to do that, though. And again, he was troubled, which is why he came on the Dave Ellswick show right here in the same studio I'm in right now a few weeks ago. He said, look, I had nothing to do with this. No, nothing to do with it. A couple of people at the polling place there, Batesville, Independence County, back in November, complained to the State Elections Commission. They apparently took months and months and months and months to investigate. They eventually forwarded it to the Election Integrity Office of the Attorney General's Office, Election Integrity Unit, and career seasoned prosecutors decided to forward a criminal complaint to the prosecuting attorney of Independence County. Tim Griffin's like, yeah, my fingerprints on this. I had nothing to do with it. Well, look, even the TV station up in Northeast Arkansas said Tim Griffin indicted Colonel Conrad Reynolds. We all know what's up. So no matter how blatantly Governor Sanders broke the law, and again, we have been told all of our lives that ignorance of the law is no excuse. So she asks her staff on more than one occasion, are you sure I'm far enough away from the polling place? Oh yeah, you're fine. Again, it's not our fault that she hires kids to be her staff, very young people, most of whom don't seem to have much experience in the world. That's not our fault. So, will it have any effect on her political future? Probably not. So then why do you even bother, Doc? Why do you even waste your time? Why do the guys in Franklin County even waste their time? Why did Marvin Fisher even waste his time filing police reports? You want the answer? Can you handle the truth? Because it's the right thing to do. That's it. Our job is not to try to figure out what's going to be worth doing when you know it's the right thing to do. So anyway, if you want to sound off and talk back, especially if you're one of those people who thinks that I'm not being fair to the governor, we love hearing from you. 501-401-1011. The Doc Washburn Show continues on 101.1 The Answer. One of the things about Arkansas is you get 4 seasons. You absolutely do. Winter, spring, summer, and fall. And we are definitely in fall, and it's getting cooler and cooler all the time. So what are you going to do if it gets real cold and your heating system stops working? I got one answer. Call my buddy Brian Knight, owner of Knight's Service Company. They've been guarding your comfort in Central Arkansas for over 25 years. Brian Knight's my buddy. I trust him. They got a family-owned HVAC business, and they built their reputation on Christian principles, honest service, putting the customers first. Whether it's AC, heating, or refrigerating, if it heats or cools in your home or business, they fix it, or they can install a new unit, residential or commercial, either way. Just ask Knight's Service Company to see their list of commercial customers who have been trusting them with their business for years. Pardon me. His service, all makes and models. They're fast, they're affordable, and they bring you nothing but honest solutions. Knight's Service Company, guarding your comfort in Central Arkansas for over 25 years. Visit knightsservicecompany.com. That's KNIGHTS servicecompany.com. I'm sorry, all apologies. Ha! It's a pun. 101.1 The Answer. Doc Washburn Show continues, so you can sound off and talk back at 501-401-1011. My first public appearance since returning to Little Rock Radio is going to be a week from tomorrow, Saturday, November 8th, 2 p.m., Salem Media's annual Faith and Liberty Summit at the 4 Point Sheridan in Little Rock. Don't miss it. My friends, Dave Ellswick, Steve Marston, and our national guy, Hugh Hewitt, will also be there. But I'll be speaking at 2 p.m., Saturday, November 8th, Salem Media's annual Faith and Liberty Summit at the 4 Points Sheridan in Little Rock. Okay, more coming out. More coming out about the thwarted jihad attack in Michigan, the Dearborn area, if you catch my drift. Some more details emerging. The FBI raided multiple homes in Dearborn, Michigan, and a storage facility in nearby Inkster. At least 2 suspects are in custody. 2 more people were taken in for questioning. There was some sort of chat room where the suspects discussed plotting an ISIS-inspired terror attack for Pumpkin Day, so-called. The suspects also went to a shooting range to practice firing AK-47s and doing tactical high-speed reloads. Now, an ISIS-inspired terror attack. Well, what kind of terror attacks did ISIS do? I'm old enough to remember. ISIS would behead people. ISIS would put people in cages and then set them on fire. I mean, they're legit as bad as anybody on this earth. You know what I'm saying? No, listen to me. You can't say okay, mass murderer Ted Bundy was horrific. Mass murderer Jeffrey Dahmer was horrific. Mass murderer, who was the clown up there in the Chicagoland? The big fat guy back in the 70s, 80s, killed all those kids. John Wayne Gacy. You can't say all those guys are terrible. And you know, I watch those true crime shows on Discovery ID or HLN or whatever, and all those guys are terrible. And then say, well, yeah, but the Muslims, they got a point. No, I'm sorry. Same thing, bro. Same thing. There's no difference between ISIS and John Wayne Gacy or Jeffrey Dahmer or Bundy. No difference at all. And let me just put a finer point on it. Most folks that listen to talk radio have seen some kind of videos having something to do with the October 7th massacre. You may not have seen the ones that are really graphic about the murders, but you probably have seen the ones of a terrified mother holding her 4-year-old and her baby, 2 little redheaded kids, terrified she's being taken away from Israel to Gaza. Did you know that months later, Hamas handed over the bodies in the coffins? Well, it turned out they handed over the wrong woman. But they had a great celebration with all kinds of just regular citizens of Gaza, not even Hamas, just regular citizens celebrating the fact that they had killed the mother and these 2 little babies with their hands. They had strangled them to death. And they celebrated. How many military-aged jihad supporters did Joe Biden, border czar Kamala Harris, and Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas allow to stream across our southern border for the 4 years they were in power? You remember the border that Mayorkas said under oath was closed. Now, for all the complaining that we do about Republicans in Congress, for all the complaining we do that they don't ever do anything, they don't ever get anything done, just talk, talk, talk. Another strongly worded letter. For all the complaining that we do, I bet you don't know something they did do. I bet you most people, even listening to talk radio, we're not told when they do something right. So let me tell you something. For all these people talking about how the people who did bad things need to be held accountable, for all these people talking about how So many of these people, Laken Riley over there in Georgia, who was murdered and raped by an illegal alien on the grounds of the University of Georgia in Athens. For all these people who talk about all these murder victims, and why don't Republicans in Congress do something? May I please tell you something they did do? The Republicans in the U.S. House last year voted to impeach Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas. Did anyone tell you that? Have you heard that from anywhere? And now let me explain something to you about that. Their majority in the House is so razor thin that every last one of them, all of the Republicans in the U.S. House, had to vote to impeach him for that impeachment vote to get out of the House. And you know what? Every last one of them did, including all four of our guys in Arkansas: French Hill, Bruce Westerman, Rick Crawford, even Steve Womack, the most liberal of the four. Every one of them voted to impeach Mayorkas. You know, we talk about sometimes Republican members of Congress get a little shaky. Don't always support the president. And love him or hate him, because some people love him and some people hate him. Thomas Massie out of Kentucky, he voted to impeach him. So the Constitution says when somebody gets impeached in the House, then that impeachment count goes to the Senate, and the Senate shall hold a trial. And you know what? Democrats are still in charge of the Senate last year, and Chuck Schumer's like, we don't care what the Constitution says. We're not going to have a trial for Mayorkas. Hang that up. We're just going to ignore that impeachment vote. The first time in 235 years that the Senate said, we will ignore an impeachment vote out of the House, because they don't just impeach presidents. You can impeach cabinet secretaries, and they did, and nobody ever talks about it. Nobody told you this. I'm going to give credit where it's due. Thank you, French Hill, for voting to impeach Alejandro Mayorkas. I mean, I disagree with a lot of stuff you do, a lot of stuff you stand for, but I give you credit on that. Nobody talks about it. Most people within the sound of my voice have no idea that happened. I see people on social media all the time. Well, why don't you impeach somebody like Mayorkas? They did. But nobody talks about it. There's plenty more to talk about. I don't know where the time goes. We got like a half hour left in the Doc Washburn Show, and I'm going to jam as much information in. Sensory overload, information overload, coming up right after this. 101.1 The Answer. Doc Washburn Show continues, where you can sound off and talk back. 501-401-1011. You know, this looks to be like news that is probably worth sharing with you. The Atlantic magazine has this, but also a lot of other mainstream media sources have this. This is written by 3 reporters of the Atlantic, and I get it. The Atlantic magazine is liberal. I get it. But a lot of conservatives on social media are sharing this. Young Steve, you're sitting down, right? Okay, the headline: top Trump officials are moving on to military bases. Subhead: Stephen Miller, Marco Rubio, Kristi Noem, and others have taken over homes that until recently housed senior officers. Now, I'm not a subscriber to the Atlantic, so they're going to give me about 2.5 paragraphs, but I think that'll be enough to get the point. The former White House advisor, Katie Miller, mother of 3 young children and wife of the presidential right-hand man, Stephen Miller, walked out of her front door one Thursday morning last month and was confronted by a woman she did not know. When she told this story on Fox News, she described the encounter as a protest that crossed a line. The stranger had told Ms. Miller, again, wife of Stephen Miller and mother of 3 small children, quote, "I'm watching you," unquote. This was the day after Charlie Kirk's assassination, and it also wasn't anything new. Now, would you expect a paragraph like this out of something like The Atlantic, which is like a hard left magazine? I wouldn't. I'm like, okay, you got my attention. Second paragraph: for weeks before Charlie Kirk's death, well, again, they're left-wing, so they don't say it's an assassination, they say it's death. For weeks before Charlie Kirk's death, activists had been protesting the Millers' presence in North Arlington, Virginia. Someone had put up a wanted posters in their neighborhood with their home address, denouncing Stephen as a Nazi who had committed, quote, crimes against humanity, unquote. A group called Arlington Neighbors United for Humanity warned in a post on Instagram, quote, "Your efforts to dismantle our democracy and destroy our social safety net will not be tolerated here," unquote. The local protest became a backdrop to the Trump administration's response to Charlie Kirk's killing. When Stephen Miller, the architect of that response, who is known for his inflammatory political rhetoric, announced a legal crackdown on liberal groups, a legal crackdown on liberal groups? I'm sure he has not announced a legal crackdown on liberal groups that obey the law. But anyway, he singled out the tactics that had victimized his family, what he called organized campaigns of dehumanization, vilification, posting people's addresses. Okay, we're going to get as far into the third paragraph as we can. Stephen Miller soon joined a growing list of senior Trump administration political appointees, at least 6 by our count, living in Washington area military housing, where they are shielded not just from potential violence, but also from protest. Sounds like that bothers the Atlantic. It is an ominous marker of the nation's polarization to which the Trump administration has itself contributed. Oh, shut up! 3 days after he announced, "I'm running again," Jack Smith says, "Nah, we're going to put you in federal prison for the rest of your life, and as many of your supporters as we possibly can." The Atlantic wants you to ignore that. So, it is an ominous marker of the nation's polarization, to which the Trump administration has itself contributed, that some of those top public servants have felt a need to separate themselves from the public. These civilian officials can now depend on the U.S. military to augment their personal security. Well, they just about have to, don't they? So here's the irony. The article starts with, as much justification as you need. If you're a member of Trump's inner circle in the White House, that, okay, well, we're going to have to move the whole family to a military base. And then by the third paragraph, it's like, yeah, but, isn't it a drag? Because, they have a lot to do with blah. Come on, man. Give me a break. New York Times. Trump officials move into military residences in D.C. area. Subheadline, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth moved into a home at Fort McNair, traditionally reserved for the Army's Vice Chief of Staff. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and others also now live in military housing. This is the real thing, just so you know. This is the real thing. And you know what? I got to tell you something. My favorite member of the Arkansas congressional delegation, the 4 members of the House and the 2 members of the U.S. Senate that we send to Washington, my favorite member is Bruce Westerman, who represents the 4th District. Now, that is all of southern Arkansas, from the Delta all the way over to the west side of the part of the state, and his district goes way up in the northwest Arkansas. Because Bruce Westerman, more than anybody else, you can disagree with him publicly about something, and he never takes it personally. So I say all that to say this. I need to tell you about something I did disagree with him publicly on. So after the 2020 election, which I believe was stolen, and I've always said that, the state of Texas was suing several states which did not secure their elections because they believed that it deprived them of the right to have the president they wanted because the election was stolen. The election was rigged. And Bruce Westerman was one of about 100 members of the U.S. House to sign an amicus brief supporting the state of Texas in their lawsuit against these other states. Now, U.S. Constitution says if a state sues one or more other states over whatever, that lawsuit does not start in a lower court. It is heard right away, first and last, by the U.S. Supreme Court. That's where the lawsuit goes. And you know what? The U.S. Supreme Court on a Friday evening voted 7-2 to ignore the Constitution. Now, we like to think that President Trump put 3 pretty good people on the Supreme Court, but maybe not so much. I mean, I'm glad they overturned Roe, don't get me wrong, but only 2 justices on the U.S. Supreme Court said, yeah, we're going to follow the Constitution. We have to at least take this lawsuit, whether we, uphold it or turn it down, whatever. It was only Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito. That's it. Amy Coney Barrett, Brett Kavanaugh, Neil Gorsuch, all voted with Roberts and the 3 liberals. No, we're not going to hear that. We don't care what the Constitution says, that if a state sues one or more other states, the Supreme Court has to hear it. We're not going to hear it. So after that, on a Friday evening, Bruce Westerman goes out on social media and says, well, that was our last best shot. We gave it our all. But at this point, it's time to, stop fighting over the 2020 election and come together and unify as Americans. And I was bitterly disappointed, and I said as much. And I got a call from his office on Monday morning. This is back when I was at the other station, saying, Representative Westerman would like to come on your show this afternoon if you have time. I'm like, I always have time for Bruce Westerman. Absolutely. So he came on my show, and I said, with all respect, sir, the majority of people who responded on Twitter to you saying, now's the time to give up the fight and come together as Americans, the majority of those people believe that you need to be in federal prison for simply signing the amicus brief supporting Texas lawsuit against the other states. I said, with respect, sir, you're not going to be able to unite with people like that. So what have we seen happen? Well, they already tried to kill a bunch of members of Congress at that ball practice and that ball field in Northern Virginia. Almost killed Steve Scalise. They tried to kill Trump twice. They killed Charlie Kirk. Luigi Mangione shot that CEO in the back. He killed a couple of members of the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. Antifa killed a guy in Portland. And here's the really troubling thing. We see one opinion poll after another saying that a significant minority of self-described liberals believe that political violence is in some cases justified in the United States of America. So I think that we should all be concerned about what's going on. So the New York Times, Trump officials move into military residences in D.C. area. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth moved into a home at Fort McNair, traditionally reserved for the Army's Vice Chief of Staff. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and others now live in military housing. And I'll share this with you, as much of it as I can. Coming up, we really need to pray for our country, because the deep state, the people who fund Antifa, people like Soros, they're not going to roll over. Again, never forget, because this may be the first time you've ever heard the sound of my voice. The DOJ, the feds, have announced they do definitely plan to impanel a federal grand jury in Fort Pierce, Florida in January to investigate not only the raid on Mar-a-Lago, but what led up to it. The FBI was looking for documents proving the coup, the years-long coup against Trump and against all of us. This is going to get deep. All right, Doc Washburn Show continues. If you want to sound off and talk back, 501-401-1011. You're on 101.1 The Answer. Hey, health insurance can be confusing. We all know that, but I have some really good news for you. Tammy Chase owns an independent insurance agency in Maumelle, and she actually takes the time to sit down with you in person and explain everything in plain English. Whether you're way under 65, just trying to figure out family health, dental, and vision coverage, or you're actually nearing Medicare age, feeling overwhelmed by all the choices, Tammy Chase handles it all. She works with multiple insurance companies, so you're not limited to just one option. Tammy Chase finds out what works for your situation and budget. She can help you sign up for Medicaid, too. But here's what really sets Tammy Chase apart. She doesn't just sign you up and disappear. Tammy Chase and her team are there start to finish. When enrollment periods come up, Tammy Chase helps you review and make changes, even with specialized plans like cancer, heart attack, and stroke coverage. If you're tired of feeling confused about insurance, visit TammyChaseInsurance.com. Trust me, having someone local who actually cares makes all the difference in the world. Their website again, TammyChaseInsurance.com. 101.1 The Answer. Doc Washburn Show continues. Where you can sound off and talk back 501-401-1011. So, New York Times says Quarters 8 at Fort McNair in Washington, situated along the Anacostia River, has traditionally been the home of the Army's Vice Chief of Staff. But at the beginning of President Trump's second term, it was vacant. The general promoted to the Vice Chief's position had opted to remain on a different base nearby across the Potomac. That provided an opening for Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to claim it. As Mr. Hegseth settled into the home, which in Army history notes is guarded by 2 Revolutionary War-era cannons, other Trump officials also took up residence at housing built and designed for senior admirals and generals in the Washington area. A handful of White House officials have lived in military housing in the past, but it appears to be unusual for several cabinet members and other officials to move into military quarters in such a short amount of time. Gee, I wonder if they're going to tell why this was necessary. I mean, it is the New York Times, you know what I'm saying? The Atlantic magazine at least started off saying, well, you know, here's what happened outside Stephen Miller's home. New York Times says 3 former residents of Quarters 8 expressed frustration that a senior officer was not living at the home, which they said would cause a ripple effect and make it more difficult for admirals and generals posted in the area to find affordable housing. Oh, okay. Well, then just let the people on the Trump team just suffer the consequences, the outrageous slings and arrows of fortune. If they get killed, they get killed. Whatever. I guess that's what they're saying here. Retired Army General Dennis J. Reimer, who lived in Quarters 8 when he served as the Army's Vice Chief of Staff in the early 90s, said it's a great place. It's like one out of the movies. You have that spiral staircase and you ride over a riverbank. The trend of Trump administration officials taking over military residences in the region was reported earlier by The Atlantic. Boy, was it ever. Soon after he was sworn in, Secretary of State Marco Rubio moved in a couple of doors down from his Pentagon counterpart. Rubio lives there mostly alone. His family has opted to stay in Florida, according to a State Department official who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss a sensitive matter. Ooh, that's not good. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem lives in a government representation facility owned by the Coast Guard and is paying fair market rent, according to Tricia McLaughlin, Department of Homeland Security spokeswoman. Daniel P. Driscoll, Army Secretary, has also moved into military housing, as has Navy Secretary John Phelan, whose home in Washington was damaged in a fire in May, according to a congressional staff member who is not, again, authorized to speak publicly and spoke on the condition of anonymity. During Mr. Trump's first term, only Jim Mattis, remember that? Mad Dog Mattis, Defense Secretary, and then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo were known to have lived for a time in military housing. And it goes on and on and on and on and on, but I don't know if it's ever going to get around to talk about why it's necessary, where their lives are in danger. Because, again, it is the New York Times. But it is, and they are. Kimberly Strassel over the Wall Street Journal has this little op-ed, Jack Smith, Master Angler. Subtitle, as he targeted Trump, the special prosecutor cast a net the size of the Republican Ocean. We talked about this yesterday earlier in the show. She says, is anything more enthralling than that twitch upon the thread? The prospect of landing something, anything, that drives the fisherman to cast after cast? Not apparently for former special counsel Jack Smith. Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley this week broke the news that Jack Smith, under the auspices of nabbing Donald Trump for the events of January 6, 2021, secretly plumbed the depths of the entire Republican Ocean. Whistleblowers provided to Grassley's team unredacted copies of 197 Arctic frost subpoenas, encompassing some 430 Republican targets, including White House officials, members of Congress, Trump family members, party organizations, think tanks, nonprofits, donors, and even journalists. Yeah, Charlie Kirk was in that list. To appreciate fully the outrageousness of this fishing expedition, remember the original setting for the Smith probe. By the time Attorney General Merrick Garland named the prosecutor to the job, November 2022, Justice Department had been investigating the events of January 6th for 22 months and had charged hundreds of people, yet none of those charged were named Trump, in part because there to this day is no evidence he communicated with the only actors, Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, who actually plotted to and did breach the Capitol on that awful day. Oh, come on, Kimberly. The cops held the doors open. Come on. The highly partisan House January 6th committee was also finishing up its own 18 months investigation, and it similarly failed to produce any straightforward evidence of a Trump crime. Undeterred, it transmitted a referral to the Justice Department suggesting to the newly named Jack Smith that Mr. Trump had engaged in a nebulous, quote, conspiracy to defraud the United States, unquote. The prosecutor ran with it. The beauty of a conspiracy charge is that it requires little more than two alleged conspirators. That explains the gargantuan net Jack Smith cast across GOP world looking for someone, anyone, who might have said or written something, anything, to prop up an indictment. This was a prosecutor in search of a crime. Well, Lavrentiy Beria, head of secret police for Joseph Stalin, always said, show me the man, I'll show you the crime. And that's what was going on. And that is one of the things I believe the federal grand jury is going to be looking into in Fort Pierce, Florida, starting in January. I'm Doc Washburn. We'll see you Monday at 4:06, God willing. The great Dave Ellswick is up Monday morning at 7 right here.